When I was a teenager, I would often explore the deep web with my friends, specifically weird stuff on Hidden Wiki. There were definitely a lot of links to choose from. I never clicked on the violent links because I'm not into that. My friend Latrice told me to click on one that says new best friend. After doing so, it takes you to a page where you have to make a profile. I put the name Lisa on my profile. My real name is Susan. Once I made the profile, you are directed to a main page that has categories. They were silly, serious, smart, and smothering. We clicked smothering. I thought it was funny. After choosing, there was a list of people with their pictures, male and female. I clicked on the profile of a guy that had the name 5, like the number 5. I entered, and it didn't seem like someone who would be a smothering friend. When I was searching through his profile, I received a message from him asking if I were looking for a friend. I looked at Latrice, and she laughed, but also told me to respond yes. So we're messaging back and forth for maybe 30 minutes, and then Latrice had to go. I told him I'll be back on tomorrow, and he said okay. Maybe a week went by where I would talk to him every night. He seemed very nice, so we exchanged numbers so we could talk more. Everything seemed fine until I clicked on another profile and someone else messaged me. I started talking with this other person, but still was texting the guy 5, which I knew his real name now as William. The new guy had the name Bill on his profile. A day went by and he seemed cool, but then William randomly asked me why I was talking with Bill. I didn't know what to say, so I never responded. He kept texting with angry messages, so I blocked him. I didn't receive any texts, only a single message on that site, and it said soon. One day after school, my friend Latrice came over to have a sleepover. We got comfortable, went to my room, and did our usual of surfing through the web, being nosy. I brought up that guy. Then I received a text message that said, "Why'd you block me?" from a random number. I replied with a question mark. Then he replied, "It's me, William." He texted me from another number after I blocked him. I told Latrice how creepy this guy is. Then Latrice stopped me from talking because she thought she heard something. Then I heard a voice. "I'm not that creepy." We both responded by screaming and looking around. I saw someone coming from under my bed, so we ran screaming out of my room, and my mother called the cops. They didn't get him because he left through my window, and nothing could be traced back to him. I'm starting to think that he was both of the people I was talking to. That definitely opened my eyes to the dangers of the internet. I would never visit the dark web again. This story happened about 5 years ago. It was Christmas Day around 1:30 in the morning, and I heard my upstairs screen door open. I wasn't thinking much about it, probably that Santa was dropping off gifts, or that my mom was grabbing a couple things to put under the tree. My twin sister and I were the only ones awake at the time, so we heard everything that was going on. We heard the Christmas tree and the gifts being moved around, slow, quiet footsteps moving around the house, and a beam of light moving around the living room. The light was getting closer until it reached the top of my steps, and it just stopped for about 5 seconds and left. Since I was only 10 at the time, my first thought wouldn't be that some intruder came into my house looking around. So I had an idea, and I wanted to see if there were any presents under the tree. My sister said I should wait until the morning, and that it should be a surprise. Thank God I listened to her. About 5 more minutes of hearing things moved around my house. I heard a loud, ear-piercing sound of my mom screaming. I bolted up. I ran up the stairs. And when I was halfway up, I can hear her saying, "There's a man in the house," over and over. Thank God the man got startled and ran out of the screen door. I saw my mom and my sisters getting hysterical over the situation. We called the cops. Within 3 minutes, the police showed up. Only my sister and I heard everything, from the moment the man broke in, to him moving stuff around, into the sounds of my mother screaming. We really couldn't give a good description of the guy, since we didn't actually see what he had on. All my mom saw was that he was wearing dark denim jeans and a black hoodie with the hood up. We later found out that the man also broke into my grandparents' house, who lived down the street. The scariest part of this is, when before all of this happened, my sister heard footsteps above her window and thought it was a raccoon and waved at it for some odd reason. But now we definitely know it wasn't a raccoon. And if my sister didn't tell me to go upstairs, what would have happened? What would have happened if that guy saw me by myself? One night when I was 15 years old, I arrived home just after midnight and my parents were already in bed. I decided to leave the back door unlocked for my older brother since he was sleeping over at a friend's house. Big mistake. In the middle of the night, I awoke to feel something cold and metallic pressing on my neck. At first I thought it was my brother playing a prank on me, but then I couldn't see the pitch black bedroom. Then a big hairy hand covered my nose and mouth. I couldn't breathe. I heard a deep rasping voice say, "If you make any noise, I'll kill you." After my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could make out the shape of a man leaning over me. There was no face, just a black mask with holes cut out for the eyes. He was holding a knife to my throat. I knew my parents were asleep in the next room, so I tried to make as much noise as I could, but the man's hand muffled my screams. I kicked my legs trying to bang on the walls so my parents could hear. All of a sudden, through the screams, I can hear my parents get up and they're running towards my room. When my parents opened the bedroom door, they were confronted by a terrifying scene. All they could see in the darkened room was a big black silhouette bent over me and holding a knife to my throat. As soon as he saw the knife, my father jumped on top of the intruder and struggled with him. My mother grabbed the man's wrist and wrestled the knife out of his hand. My father managed to get his arm around the masked man's neck and began to choke him. I grabbed my cell phone and I ran outside to call 911 as my parents kept the intruder pinned to the bedroom floor until the police arrived. The bedroom door burst open and a police officer ran in holding a gun, yelling, "Don't move or I'll blow your head off." The police handcuffed the intruder and dragged him out of the house. When police searched the man's truck, they found a variety of weapons and some bloody clothes. It turned out that the masked man had already murdered 2 people a few days before. My family and I, we had no way of knowing it, but we had just captured a serial killer. And the scariest part about this is that it can happen to anyone at any time. This was real. What I've learned from this is to always lock my back door. I live in a not so large and not so friendly block of apartments. Well, it's really more of a converted old Victorian house, which is now modified into 5 small apartments per block. The main door is really crappy. It still hasn't been replaced, even though the entire building has been refurbished. This is the case despite the landlord promising it would be done by the new year. Anyway, this door doesn't lock when you close it. It has to be locked manually, either by the key from the outside or by the twisty lock on the inside. Unfortunately, people who live around me can be, well, let's say rude. And that's putting it kindly. They're always blasting music until late, setting off the fire alarm, which is linked in every apartment and is super loud and annoying. But most annoyingly, always, and I mean always, people are leaving the main door unlocked. This was something more than an annoyance, up until very recently, when something truly horrific happened to me. It was a Thursday night, and as usual, I was getting ready for bed at around 11 p.m. And as usual, despite it being a weekday, one of the surrounding apartments is having a party. Again, it's the weekday, and this was annoying because who throws a party on a Thursday? I mean, just wait for Friday. Not only that though, it's supposed to be a lockdown. So while other people can't see their own families, me included, you get to keep everyone up.
The music was noticeable, but not super loud from the comfort of my bedroom, thankfully. So I do what I always do when I go to bed. I put on some scary stories. I chill, and I try to go to sleep. So I finally managed to drift off at around 12 o'clock, and I'm awakened for the first time at around 2 because of the music. So I get up and I go to the bathroom, as I thought I might as well since I'm already up. So being annoyed and frustrated, I get back into bed and continue to enjoy my stories until I'm asleep. I'm suddenly awoken by loud stumps coming up the stairs. I live at the very top of the building, so the final staircase only leads to my door. Now I'm more than exhausted, more exhausted than angry. So I just lie there, awake, until I hear something that jolts my half-asleep brain fully awake. My door being pushed open. Someone is actually trying to push open my door and enter my apartment without my permission. Not hard or forcefully, mind you. Not like they were trying to break it, but they definitely were trying to gain entry. Now this may be because my mind was still foggy, or that I was still so tired that I didn't care, but I just stupidly assumed that someone in a drunken stupor was trying to get into the wrong place. Maybe the party was at a different top floor apartment, I thought. So I ignored it. Even when it happened again, I could hear scratching and mumbling on the other side. Stupid, I know, but I really just wanted to go to sleep. So the next morning, I woke up as normal and got ready for work as I opened my door to leave. And what do I see? 2 men asleep on the floor, blocking my way, and one of them bleeding from his head. Now, I'm not judgmental, or at least I try not to be, but these men were clearly homeless. I mean, the smell alone told me that. It was like having a ball of dirt slapped in your face. Not ideal for an early morning start. When I eventually got one of them to get up, the other failed to do so. He was clearly on drugs. It was completely out of it. Thankfully for me, the man was okay. I mean, I could have been rushed or anything, but he explained to me that he had been attacked and chased, so they took shelter here. So I offered to call the ambulance, which the men eventually accepted through a one-sided conversation of murmurs and groans. So I stepped out to get a better look at the man on the ground. As I did so, the other man stepped inside of my apartment. I just stared at him with our eyes locking. He reached in his pocket and I postured up ready to fight. He looked at the other man and he just shook his head as if he were saying no. And thankfully he just came back out without incident, and I locked my door. The ambulance eventually came. I informed my landlord of this, and he said that he would warn the other people living there that they must keep the door locked. But of course, every morning I go to work, the door is wide open with no consequence. But the real kicker is, because that guy was bleeding and was homeless, I didn't want to clean it myself and had to get professional cleaners to do so. And when I asked for my landlord to chip in, he just ignored me for days. And when he eventually got back to me, he said it's not that big of a deal. So I ended up paying for the whole thing myself, because I just didn't feel comfortable with that being around me. Now, I don't believe those men had intentions to hurt me. But what if I didn't lock my door? What if they had gotten in? When people are desperate and opportunities present themselves, you really don't know what people would do. 2 of them and 1 of me, asleep and alone, pretty scary when you think about it, right?
My name is Nikki and I'm 19 years old. This past December, I got myself a Christmas temp job working at Amazon, helping with deliveries. It gets pretty busy around that time for deliveries, obviously, because it's Christmas. Right away, I hated the guy I was helping with deliveries. His name was Frank. To describe him, he was a bit overweight, didn't shave well, and his hair was short. I didn't like him because he was very rude and seemed like he was in a bad mood all the time. And I would be in the van with him most of the time making deliveries, and it was very awkward. I tried to make conversation with him, but like I said, he was very rude. And there was no point in trying after about 2 times. I thought about quitting, to be honest, or at least be with a different delivery driver, but I didn't want to cause any trouble. I was a temp after all and needed this job.
I thought Frank was really rude and socially awkward and not a nice person to be around, but I never thought he would harm me in any way. One evening after finishing deliveries, we were driving back to the Amazon warehouse, or at least that's where I thought we were going. Frank passed the turn where we always go to the warehouse. As I said before, we didn't really speak, so I wasn't about to question him. He would probably snap at me anyway. After he continued driving, the more obvious it was to me he was taking me to another place, and it wasn't the warehouse. I finally asked Frank where we were going. He didn't snap at me, surprisingly. He just said we needed to run and do a quick errand. I was looking around my surroundings, and I could see that we were around empty fields and abandoned farmhouses. At this point, it was getting dark outside. Frank then pulled up next to a tall, overgrown, and unkempt cornfield. He said to me in a very firm voice to stay exactly where I was. "Don't move." Frank then got out of the car and started walking up into the dirt road, disappearing into the dark of night. 10 minutes went by. I sat in the van by myself in the dark and had no idea where I was. My phone was in the warehouse in the locker, as we weren't allowed to have our phones during work hours, so I couldn't even go on my phone or use it as a light source. I needed to pee and couldn't hold it any longer, so I got out of the van and headed into the cornfield to do my business. After doing so, I started to walk back towards the van. In the near distance of the cornfield, I could see flashlights. 2, in fact. I found that really odd, as the whole area seemed to be abandoned. As I got closer to the van, I could hear a sort of heated argument going on between Frank and another man whose voice I couldn't recognize. I couldn't see him either. I heard the other man say, "Where is she? You said she was in the van." Frank then told the man that she was just in there, and she has to be around here somewhere. The other man said to Frank, "If we don't find her, you're a dead man." That's what those flashlights were. Those men were already out in the cornfield searching for me. I snuck off into the field, walking quickly but as quietly as I could, the whole time crying and thinking I was about to die. After walking far enough, eventually leaving the cornfield, I ran down the side of a long dirt road. I have no idea for how long, but eventually I came across an old diner which was still open, thank God, and the manager called the police for me. After this incident, I quit my job, but this wasn't the end of it. About 2 weeks after quitting my job, I got a call from my boss who employed me. He told me that I was the last one to see Frank, as no one has seen him since. Apparently there were rumors that he owed people money from gambling debts, the people you don't want to be in debt with. As much as I don't like to think about it, I'm pretty sure Frank's way of paying off his debts with those people was to hand me over to those men. And what those men had planned to do with me, I never wanted to imagine.
Nightmare 5.